A lot of other people have been posting online about water theft in California. Here's one saying Nestle steals 58 million gallons of water annually from the national forest 60 miles from these fires. This is kind of true, but technically false because, and I covered it at the time a few years ago, Nestle actually sold all their water interests. So they might still own some small bit, but for the most part, it is no longer Nestle. Nestle has stolen, not sold. Nestle has sold their waters to a private equity firm that then rebranded itself as Blue Triton Brands. So Blue Triton now owns all of these Nestle water rights, all of these Nestle water bottling types. Again, there might be one or two that's still owned by Nestle, but most of them are now owned by Blue Triton. And this is actually a bit, thanks to activism and thanks to lawsuits. Enough people were bringing lawsuits and activism, raising the alarm against Nestle, that I think Nestle decided for brand image, it actually was not that beneficial for them to continue to have their waters. And so they sold them for billions and billions of dollars. They also made a lot of money from selling them. But it doesn't mean that the water theft has stopped. It means it's not Nestle anymore, technically. But you can see what these sociopaths continue to do, because this article is a few years old. Nestle doesn't have valid rights to water. It's been bottling in California. And I think the main brand that this is referring to is Arrowhead. The Arrowhead bottled water was being scooped up from California forest for something like $2,000 a year. A year. That's what Nestle pays for the special fart cushion that their CEO farts into, okay? He probably has a $2,000 fart cushion. Now, this is a meaningless amount of money for Nestle. And I think it may continue. I don't know whether it's been stopped for Blue Triton. I think Blue Triton basically took over all of the ongoing Nestle theft of water. And this water is stolen from California. It's then bottled and sold, even though it technically should be owned by the people of California. It should not belong to a corporation. Here's another article. This is, by the way, this is in the middle of horrific drought in Los Angeles and California. Another article, do you know where your bottled water comes from? Partially from drought-ridden California. And this was back in 2020, so I'm sure this is still referencing Nestle. Yeah, all these brands, Arrowhead, Crystal Geyser, Pure Life, Aquafina, and Dasani. Now those, Aquafina and Dasani, were never Nestle, but much of Aquafina is Pepsi and Dasani is Coca-Cola. Those have not changed ownership, so Coca-Cola and Dasani continue to steal water from California. And just as a side note, and as long as we're on the topic of harm against the environment and what it's doing to our planet, 1 million bottles of water are bought every minute around the world. 1 million a minute. And you know the percentage of those that get recycled? A tiny, tiny percentage. Meaning almost 1 million a minute are thrown out, are thrown on the ground, or thrown into the oceans. 1 million bottles a minute. I have to keep saying the number because it doesn't sink in. It just sounds insane. It's real. 1 million bottles a minute. So this water's theft, but so this water's stolen. It's also stolen in another way called virtual theft, in which water is virtually stolen from California. Now, how exactly does that work? There are these massive big ag companies, right? California is one of the, if not the largest farming state in the union, and they grow unbelievable amounts of various types of foods. And some of those are then shipped to other countries. So in some cases, they're shipped to China so that China can feed their cows. Like literally, was it alfalfa or something is grown in the U.S., shipped to China so China can feed their cows. That's how I'd say it is. So it's a virtual water theft in that crazy amounts of water are used to grow this food that is then shipped to other countries. So even though the water technically goes in the ground in the United States, that water is actually being stolen by other countries to get their food or to feed their cows. So there's a lot of virtual water theft that goes on as well. Then we get to another hidden story of all this, of the crazy drought in California, which is that a very large percentage of California's water, what remains of it, is owned by two people. a billionaire couple, the Resnicks, and they own the brand. Stuart and Linda Resnick own the wonderful brand. Yes, it's that dystopian. They own the wonderful brand that is destroying your your lives, just in some areas, destroying your ability to get water, destroying your ability to get clean water. It's wonderful. Isn't it wonderful? It's just wonderful. And for those of you who don't know, Wonderful owns pomegranate juice. They own Justin wine. They own pistachios. They own mandarins. They own a variety of things. You can look up all the things, and pistachios is one of the big ones. But the largest, it's not called a reservoir. It's called a water bank because it's not actually in a reservoir, but the largest water bank in California, where California during drought gets a lot of their water. 57% of that Kern Water Bank is owned by the Resnicks. Now, this should be owned by the people. It shouldn't be owned by anyone. It should be part of the natural resources of an area. But instead, 57% is owned by the Resnicks. Like, you read the story. I covered the story more in depth on a video I did for Most Censored News a couple of years back, but they were able to finagle, years ago, they were able to finagle some, committee in California, et cetera, who knows all the ins and outs, all the handies under the table, all the circle jerks that went on, all the various backroom BJs that happened. But somehow they were able to finagle it so that when the Kern Water Bank was being distributed amongst whoever would technically own it, 57% went to them, and they are now billionaires, and they have access to as much water as they ever want, while other people and other areas are in severe drought. And so you have a billionaire sucking a lot of the water out of California. Meanwhile, you'll see signs in California and alerts on the radio and stuff saying, conserve water, don't water your lawn. It'll say things like share the toilet with someone else. Like when you have to take a dump, it should be 2 or 3 of you on the toilet at once, which is tough to, scheduling is really the biggest problem with that, because you kind of got to wander around the neighborhood or the apartment building being like, hey, anyone else want to deuce it up with me? So there is that issue, but outside of the scheduling problem, it's really not an issue. But something I've always pointed out is they will never mention, through all of this Conserve Water, they'll never mention that one single hamburger uses as much water as close to 2 months of showering. One single hamburger has taken as much water to produce as 2 months of you showering. So this idiocy of like, oh, we're never going to mention that it's really big ag that is using up most of this water. Big ag is the number one use. And most of that is animal agriculture, or the feed that goes to the animals. So if we were to decrease the amount of meat we eat, you would save immense amounts of water. But instead, they're like, no, you need to sit on the toilet with a friend. It's just so stupid, so dystopian. But yeah, if you thought there was always a psychopath behind each of these problems we're facing, you're almost always right. And in this case, it is the Resnicks who are behind one of these problems. Now, again, I will keep making this point. All these things we've been saying, the issues with the fire department, the issues with droughts, like the issues with the leadership or lack thereof. There is no leadership really in these areas. I know the LA mayor was in Ghana, and she's the one, or I think she was the one who shifted the 17 million from the fire department over to the cops, et cetera, et cetera. All of these things are important. They're not going to stop catastrophic climate crisis. They might decrease it or put a little Band-Aid on some things, make it a little easier, but they're not going to stop. So we need to talk about climate crisis far more than we do.